perfect life? It's Easter Sunday. Big day for selling the idea of eternal paradise. Eternal paradise, never ending. Lux perpetuatum, light everlasting. Just can't have it while you're alive. Okay. I don't quarrel with things I can't disprove. But at the same time, to the extent that I'm in the market for perfection, I want to have it while I'm alive. I want to have it while I can enjoy it. So what would be a perfect life if you stipulate that we mean a perfect life while you're alive and not after you're dead? What would be a perfect life? I can actually offer up a practical example because I have lived with a practical example of a perfect life. Had a dog, a bloodhound, big male bloodhound, 120 pounds. His name was Odysseus. If you paid any attention to me over the years, you've no doubt seen me talking about Odysseus because he was a big part of our lives for 10 years. He was an enormous part of our lives, very high on our hierarchy of values while he was with us. He was a wonderful animal. We take good care of all of our animals, but every one of them is unique and different, just like every child, every human being is unique and different. Every pet that you could have is unique and different, and Odysseus was a remarkable specimen. He was an amazing dog. And the reason is that he had a perfect life. His life was perfect. His life was perfect every day. He never had a quarrel. Actually, he did have one, but he didn't know he had it, so it didn't make any difference to him. And got his ear bit so well that he had to have it cauterized by a laser scalpel, and he didn't notice that either. It was all fun for him. Everything was fun for him. Everything was an adventure. Everything was wonderful. Never a cross look, never a scolding word, never a dispute that he couldn't resolve just by barreling his way through it. He was a naturally dominant dog, and other dogs yielded to him without contest. They didn't quarrel. They didn't contest his dominance. They didn't seek to compete with him for dominance. Never. That never happened. I only saw him yield one time when two dogs come into contact with each other. Unless they are about equally matched in terms of the amount of will to dominance they have, if they are equally matched, they will fight for dominance, compete for dominance in one way or another. But typically one dog will recognize that the other is dominant, and the less dominant dog will shrink, just literally shrink. You have to watch. It's the first quarter second when dogs come together. If you're not watching then, you'll never see it. But when two dogs come together, seeing each other for the very first time, when they first become acquainted, typically one will yield to the other, and that will settle the dominance issue, and there won't be any fights, there won't be any problem. And the only time that you'll really be aware of the dominance hierarchy is when there's some reason for you to be aware of it, when you're feeding those dogs, or when they're going out the door or something like that, where the dominant dog will take precedence and the less dominant dogs will yield, and typically they'll yield in pecking order, just like chickens. But Odysseus was naturally dominant, and every other dog accepted his dominance, and every other dog that he ever met loved him like crazy anyway, but nothing like the people. Everybody who met Odysseus everybody who saw this dog had to come over and see him, had to meet him, had to touch him, had to talk to him, had to rub his jowls. In no time flat, they would be rubbing his belly, because as much as people loved him, he loved everybody, and he would give his belly up to anybody. We were standing on the middle of the street on Mill Avenue in Tempe, one of the busiest streets in metropolitan Phoenix, and we're standing in the middle of that street, and Odysseus is lying on his back. He's just met some new strangers, and he's lying on his back to give them his belly in the middle of the heaviest traffic in one of the busiest parts of Phoenix. This is just the way he was. It was the nature of his life, and that was his life from beginning to end. He loved everything. This dog loved the vet. We've never had a dog who loved the vet. Every dog, no matter how big, only likes the vet for the first visit. And if you want to find out how much your dog can remember, how elaborately, how carefully your dog can remember details, just watch your dog the second time you go to the vet's office. But Odysseus loved the vet. He loved the vet. It was just more roughhousing for him. It was just more fun attention that little bit of pain, a lot of pleasure. He didn't hate the pain. He was like a football player. A certain amount of pain goes along with the game, and he accepted that. The dog never cried. He never whimpered. He never yelped. He never expressed any pain at all until the day he died. He lived in a world without death. And not just because he couldn't conceptualize death. That's a wonderful thing, a wonderful gift that animals have. This is why human beings spend most of their lives pining for an animal's brain, so they can escape the pain that goes along with their past mistakes. And certainly animals are not capable of that kind of pain. They're not capable of regret, remorse. They're not capable of guilt, shame, lingering anger, anything at all like that. Can't conceptualize it, and therefore they can't have abstract memories. They can't have complex abstract memories. But certainly animals can be terribly treated, and they can suffer in their environment, and they don't have any ability to correct for their environment. They don't have any ability to understand that things can be changed, that things can be better. This is the gift of humanity as far as I'm concerned. The fact of the matter is, if you screw up, you're going to pay for it. And the harder you try not to pay for it, the harder you're going to pay for it, the more you're going to pay. But the plus side is, as soon as you note that you screwed up, or as soon as you note that your circumstances are non-ideal, no matter whose fault it is, you can figure out how to change them and how to correct them. You can work assiduously, step by step, day by day, to making your world better. And this is something that no animal can do. The wonderful thing about being a human being. But Odysseus' life was perfect. And it offers us an illustration to understand how your life can be perfect. Certainly it can't be as perfect as Odysseus' life was, because you do have a human brain, and therefore you can be aware of the slights and slanders, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that go along with being alive as a human being. But nevertheless, you can take the other half of Odysseus' attitude and understand that if you don't treat it as pain, it's not pain. If you are afraid of the vet and his anal thermometer and his needles, then you're going to respond fearfully and you're going to suffer pain. But if you are in love with the vet and you regard what he is doing as just foreplay to hugging and kissing, which is what Odysseus loved to do. If you regard what the vet is doing as just something that's leading up to even more fun, then there is no pain, there is no suffering, no matter what happens outside your mind. What happens inside your mind is thoroughly under your control. And if you choose not to notice, if you choose not to care, if you are so avidly pursuing your own values that you don't even notice what's going on around you, then what difference does it make? Your life is perfect anyway. Welcome to the Church of Splendor. My name is Greg Swann. I am your televangelist. I am your ego evangelist. I am the only person you know on the face of the earth who talks about moral perfection as an attainable ecstasy in this life, today, tomorrow, while you're still alive. Not pie in the sky. Not paradise someday. Paradise in the sweet by and by. None of that. No, 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 no. I'm not interested in the sweet by and by. If it happens, I promise to be surprised. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't believe it. And I don't believe that there's any benefit to me in giving up the one life that I can have for the sake of a theoretically perfect life that I might never have. I want to live heaven now. I want to live perfection now. I want to live splendor now. And that's how I organize my life. And that's what I'm talking to you about. The theme for today's service is "There is a crack in everything." It's a line from Leonard Cohen from the song Anthem. Leonard Cohen is a poet If you're looking for poets in this world, listen for the music, because that's the only way that poets can make a living. But Leonard Cohen is a true poet, an actual poet, not just a songwriter, not just someone who's good about bitching about his heartbreak, but a true poet who understands how to pull the veils away from the universe and expose what's really underneath. And I love that about it. I love that about it. The line is, there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And I think it's beautiful, because the alternatives that you are offered by the world at large are perfection or despair. That everyone who talks to you about anything at all really offers you that choice. They present you the absolute outermost upper limits of perfect performance, and if you can't attain that, then you're a schmuck, you're a loser, you're botched, you're among the bungled and the botched, as Nietzsche had it. That's false dichotomy, the way that philosophers would term it. It's a choice among two choices, neither one of which is really attainable, that the outermost extremes on a continuum are only there to kind of define the edge, and there really is nothing at either place. All the action is in the middle. The continuum is a bell curve, and all the action is in the middle. The extremes, the outliers are in the extremes, and the outliers are very interesting to scientists, because nobody ever wrote a headline about the dog that bit the man, only about the man that bit the dog. But outliers are very, very few in number, and they're really not terribly interesting, and they're not terribly informative about the norm. The norm can be very informative about the outliers, but the outliers are not terribly informative about the norm. And at the outermost extreme, there is nobody. There is nobody who is in a state of absolute moral perfection all the time. Never makes a mistake. Not a moral mistake, not a moral fault, not a deliberately chosen act of evil. Not only that, he doesn't do that, but not only that, he doesn't even make errors of knowledge. He never makes a mistake. No such thing. It doesn't exist. And the other end of it, there's no such thing as the perfectly evil person, the person who only chooses evil, who only does the absolute worst thing at every possible inflection point. The people over there, from good to evil, the people over there on the left edge of the bell curve are pretty screwed up, and they do choose the wrong thing very, very frequently, especially when it matters most. But the person who chooses the wrong thing without exception is very soon dead. That one just takes care of itself. The left edge of the bell curve just falls into the morgue, falls into the grave, and we never have to think about it again. But there is a crack in everything, and that's what's wrong with these formulations. You're either perfect or you're a loser, you're a schmuck, is that they're both false, and in the meantime, everyone is in the middle, and there is a crack in everything. And no matter how good you are at one particular thing, there is almost certainly someone who is better at it than you. And if he's not better at it than you today, he will be tomorrow. And if you don't believe me, ask Tiger Woods. But even when you're that good at one thing, you're not that good at everything. And there's nobody who's even reasonably competent at everything. It's very rare to find someone who does anything well, and it's very rare to find someone who does more than one thing well. And when you find someone who does a lot of things very, very well, this is a very worthwhile person to know. You probably call him boss. But even then, he doesn't do everything well. 16 quarters in a row, perfectly profitable. Every time you turn around, he's coming up with the new cost-cutting ideas. The best CEO this company has ever had. But do not ever play golf with that guy. You'll be out there for 4 hours and you still won't finish. That's the way the world works. There's a crack in everything. But that's how the light gets in. That's how you get better, is where the things are broken. You are not broken. You are not bungled and botched. You are not defective. You are not wrong. Fundamentally wrong. Wrong in every possible way. You are not a moral failure. You are not something to be kept alive like a pigeon in a pen on a roof, just kept alive for the sake of being kept alive until you die. You are not just a useless eater in the formulation of the Marxists. You are not a pet. You are not a burden. You are not a waste. You are a specimen of humanity. Potentially perfect, in everything that you do, and practically speaking, perfect in say just the way you are, perfect as you are. Because you're as perfect as any other living organism. One of the things that was most endearing about Odysseus was his arrogance. He was arrogant. I mean, this is a naturally dominant dog, that big, bloodhounds anyway, they're very independent dogs. And he just stalked the earth. He walked the earth like he was king of it, like it was all his. Nobody resented that, nobody objected to it, nobody regarded it as being anything other than appropriate because he was a dog, and this is the way animals behave. That when you see an animal, whether he's very regal and dominant or just Joe Ordinary, just Heinz 57, just another mud, the dog has no shortage of confidence. The dog pokes his nose into anything he wants to. He goes where he wants to go. He looks at what he wants to look at. He sniffs at anything he wants to, and if you think that's inappropriate, that's your problem. If you think about the way a lion moves, the way a lion stalks the earth, everything is his property, everything is his dinner if he wants it. That's ontologically normal. That's what ontologically normal looks like in every other sort of organism than us. When you see a dog that cowers in on itself, that hides, that keeps its tail tucked between its legs, that's always looking to see if it needs to be running away, when you see a dog like that, you know you've seen a dog that's been mistreated. It's been abused. Someone has beaten that dog. And that's why he behaves that way. That's not normal, that's not natural, that's not ontologically normal. If you had seen that dog as a puppy, he didn't behave anything at all like that. He behaves that way in response to the treatment that he's received from the world, probably from people, but he's been badly used, and that's reflected in his behavior. Let's go to the mall. Look at people. How many people do you see who are folded in on themselves like that dog was, that are just cowering and looking around all over the place, always looking for a warning, looking to see if they need to be running away, to see if their fear is justified. They live in a state of perpetual fear. There are all kinds of other things I could point out in looking at people at the mall, and if you would ever like to find out just how much I can see in people just by looking at them, just by the photons that are bouncing off them, take me to the mall sometime. Let's talk. I will give you an education in 2 hours, but simply that evidence of mistreatment, abuse. When you see someone cowering like that, that person has been abused by someone. It doesn't mean physically abused. It almost certainly means emotionally abused. Lied to about his efficacy or her efficacy, her appropriateness to be alive, her ontological normality, told that she was defective, that she was bungled and botched, that he's a loser, that he can't get anything right, that he's defective, that every dog, every stray dog on the street is completely normal, every lion on the savannah is completely normal, and yet virtually every human being at the mall walks around offering up evidences that that person, he himself, she herself, believes that she is defective, that she is botched, but also offering up evidence that someone, maybe a lot of people, but someone has offered up that argument enough times that it took, that the person accepted it. They're following through on it, not by a conscious understanding, but simply by a emotional sum and emotional integration brought about by repeated instances of the problem. You beat a dog once, he doesn't know what happened. You beat him twice, he's wary of you. It's only when you beat him 3 times or 4 times or a dozen times he starts to look beaten all the time. And so when you're seeing people who look beaten all the time, you're seeing people who've been beaten a lot. Thoroughgoingly beaten to a pulp, to an emotional pulp. That's what you're seeing. But there's no reason for that. You are not broken. There's nothing wrong with you in the same way there's nothing wrong with any puppy in that litter. There's nothing wrong with any dog. There's nothing wrong with any lion. There's nothing wrong with any bug. Every organism is perfect the way it is. I mean, you tell me that there's a defect, we can talk about it, but if you can't identify a defect, that organism is perfect, and you can name categories by which some characteristics can be better than others. And so, like, you imagine a dog show, every dog in the dog show is ranked one above the other, one below the next. Finally, there's best in breed, and then ultimately there's best in show. All the dogs are ranked, and yet every one of those dogs knows he is perfect and has no doubt about his own ontological perfection, his own ontological normality. Obviously, the dog is not capable of doubt, but the dog doesn't express any doubt. These dogs have not been beaten, and so they don't express anything that looks like doubt. They are all perfect, and they all act like they're perfect. And at the mall, almost nobody acts that way. Almost nobody acts that way in real life. Almost no people act like that. And the ones who do, we deride as being arrogant, as being defective, as being wrong. We see what we would regard as an absolutely normal arrogance in any other kind of animal, particularly in any mammal, and obviously in our dogs and our pets, a normal arrogance. When we see that in a human being, we deride it, we ridicule it, we criticize it, we damn it, we express our outrage and rancor over ontological normality, the way we should be. If there's any such thing as should in human nature, a human being should act like he's competent to be alive. He should at least express the confidence of a normal Heinz 57 dog. He should at least express the confidence of a normal lion about his appropriateness to be alive, about his adaptation to his environment, about his competence to master that environment. That's normal in a human being, and everything else is abnormal. That behavior is impeding your expression of your interior moral perfection. That to achieve anything like a moral perfection, you have to do better in your behavior. You have to choose better. You have to choose admirably in every choice that you make. But one of the least admirable choices that you make is one that you make all the time. You tell lies about yourself. You tell lies about how defective you are, about how wrong you are, how ill-adapted you are to your environment, how incompetent you are to master that environment, how you don't measure up in any respect with regard to anyone else or with regard to any sort of idea of abstract perfection. There's nothing you can get right, and all you can do is get everything wrong. You tell this shit to yourself all the time. This is why the people in the mall are walking that way. It's because you're walking that way too. You just don't see it in yourself. But one way or another, every one of those people is expressing fear, uncertainty, doubt, guilt, shame, remorse, but most fundamentally expressing continuous low-grade fear. Really, that they don't deserve to be alive. That what Odysseus expressed with his arrogance is a natural, inborn analog to confidence. Confidence is an abstract idea. You can't have it without understanding it in the abstract. But animals express an analog of that that is just so amazingly beautiful and so thoroughly appropriate. It is 100% perfectly appropriate to their lives as organisms, because that is how they stay alive. That awareness of what needs to be done and the willingness to jump in and do it with a full commitment, unlimited commitment, no doubts, no second guessing, no subjunctive postulations about what you could be and should be doing. Instead, just a complete thoroughgoing commitment to the job of being alive. And they do it perfectly, and they do it beautifully. And we don't, for the most part. And that's a mistake. If you're looking for something that's broken, that's what's broken. What's broken is your arrogance. What's broken is your self-regard. What's broken is your self-love. What's broken is your self-image. You can fix this. You can fix this. You became a human being when you were 4 or 5 years old, and it's a gradual process. It's not something that happens right away, but your awareness of it will be a bright line distinction, because your life as a human being began with your conscious memories. You had a life as a toddler before that, and a life as an infant before that, and a life as a prenatal infant before that. All of these lives were true, and they were real, and there's absolutely no basis in insisting that any of these genetic Homo sapiens were not alive, and were not alive in a way that they should be valued by human beings. But you weren't a human being. You weren't a human being until, practically speaking, until you had conscious memory. And one of the things that you can pick out events very early in that process will be you developed a secret life. You suddenly had parts of your life that you didn't share with anyone, that you didn't talk about with anyone, and that you took care to make sure that they didn't know about. That's one of the ways you have of knowing when you became a human being. But I think commonly, maybe most commonly, and maybe ubiquitously, maybe universally, the experience that will denote the bright line change in your mind from being primarily a mammal-like mind, behaving more like a dog than a human being, and the switch to becoming a human-like mind and thereafter behaving more like a human being than like a mammal, the bright line distinction very probably occurred in the form of a disappointment, a defect, that you had been going along just like a dog goes along, expecting that everything is the way it is because that's the way it is, and that it's not going to change because nothing changes. You didn't think about this because you weren't thinking about anything in the abstract. You weren't thinking about anything conceptually. But nothing changed, and you had no reason to expect that anything ever would change, and nothing ever did change, and so nothing changed in your expectation either. And that went for the human beings in your life also, the adults who were raising you, your parents primarily, but also their brothers and sisters and their parents and their friends. All of these people had children of their own, and so their older children are involved, and there are lots and lots of grown-ups who are involved in your life when you're very young, when you're a toddler, but obviously it's mainly your parents. It's 80% or more your parents. And they never seemed to change either. Their behavior was extremely predictable and extremely reliable and extremely trustworthy. And you had no fear because nothing ever changed. Your life was completely secure. It was exactly like being swaddled up in baby blankets in the nursery at the hospital when you were just born, except as much as your circumstances changed, that feeling of swaddling didn't change because nothing ever really changed. Everything was good. Your life was perfect in the sense that Odysseus' life was perfect, that to the extent that you knew what was going on, it was all delightful, and if something that might not have been delightful to you was going on, you didn't know about it, or you didn't care about it, so it didn't matter to you. Your life was perfect. And then something came along to disrupt that perfection. What it very probably was one or the other of your parents or some other grown-up in your life doing something that you didn't expect, that there was a moral inflection point. You didn't know what that was. You didn't know what a moral inflection point was, and half the people watching this movie are going to have to go to the dictionary, and the other half are going to persever in ignorance because you don't want to know what an inflection point is. But you were at a moral inflection point and you didn't know it, and the grown-up responded to that choice, that moral choice, in a way that surprised you, in a way that you didn't expect. And it may have been, in your opinion, evil. It may have been evil in my opinion, or it may just have been something you didn't expect, but because it betrayed your expectations, you suddenly discovered that you knew nothing about causality. You thought you had causality down. Spin it, watch it, spin it, watch it, spin it, watch it. You've been doing that shit for years. You thought you understood causality. Pull the cat's tail, the cat squawks. Pull the cat's tail, the cat squawks. Pull the cat's tail, the cat squawks. You thought you understood causality, and all of a sudden you know you don't, because there's a new kind of causality that you never expected. Plausibly, what makes a determinist is the inability to deal with this crisis. That if you're looking for philosophical determinists and why they say the most amazingly stupid things, and yet all of them have luggage tags. All of them believe in free will 100% of the time, except when they're in the classroom insisting that they don't believe in free will. It may be an inability to deal with this crisis of epistemology. There's a new kind of causality that I never suspected before, and it's really racking my mind. I don't know what to do about this. It's free will. You discovered free will, And it took you by surprise, and in taking you by surprise, you suddenly knew that you couldn't depend on other people. This is when your aloneness began. If you're looking for separation, the point at which you are aware that you are completely separate from everything else, all other things, all other organisms, and most especially you are separated from your parents. You are completely separate, alone, all on your own. You are just as much alone as if you were in a lifeboat 3,000 miles from it. You are all alone in the world, and you discover it at that point, the age of conceptual fluency. My guess is you discover it by being disappointed in some choice that one or the other of your parents made, and that very probably is your first memory, is that disappointment, that awareness of disappointment, and that sudden awareness that you didn't have everything figured out at all. Very soon after this is the age of conceptual fluency, so this is the point at which you are really capable of engaging in conversation. You've been chattering for a long time, and the grown-ups around you probably thought you were chattering coherently because the signals they gave you matched the signals that you gave back. The call and response made sense, and so it seemed like a conversation, but it really wasn't, because you were pattern matching like a dog. You're better at it than a dog, but you were still pattern matching like a dog. You weren't really dealing with abstract conceptual categories. You were dealing with kind of a shoe tree full of little pockets in which you had tossed stuff. Here's some rocks, here's some marbles, here's some puppies, here's some books, here's my Legos. It's the birth of conceptual categorization, but you really don't know how to do it yet, and it's that age of conceptual fluency, the birth of guile, the birth of secrecy, the birth of the understanding of free will as a cause. All of these things are happening all at the same time, and it's all of them happening all together. There are other events that are happening at the same time also. All of these events happening together represents the birth of human consciousness in your mind, the birth of conceptual fluency, the birth of abstract reasoning, the birth of informed discretion. You've been choosing all along, and if you don't believe that mammals can choose, you need to put your dog on a lead and show him to a rabbit. And he will show you choice in action if he has to drag you all the way up the street. All organisms have will in one way or another. They all have the power to choose in one way or another. The more complex the organism is, the greater the complexity of the choices that organism can effect. But only you can choose conceptually. Only you can choose based on an abstract understanding of the true facts of the situation, a complete comprehensive understanding of the facts. No dog can do this. No dolphin can do this. No ape can do this. No elephant can do this. All of the dancing bears that the determinists want to trot out in order to engage in their lifelong will, their lifelong war against free will, all of the dancing bears that they want to trot out, none of those organisms is capable of conceptual understanding. There's another error here that is equally as bad, but one that we're not as likely to notice because we're not being insulted. When a scientist insists that a dancing bear is just as smart as you, a dancing bear is just like us, and they don't typically don't talk about dancing bears. They normally talk about dolphins and apes, but it doesn't really matter. They're all dancing bears because all mammals are dancing bears. All other non-human organisms, all aconceptual organisms are dancing bears. If they do something that looks like human behavior, it's because they were trained to do it. They can't engage in human behavior because they're not human. They don't have a human brain. Duh. They can't do what we can do because they don't have the means to do it by. They don't have the means, and they don't have the cultivation of those means. But even in the presence of the cultivation, which is what the scientists do with your tax dollars, is pretend to raise dolphins as if they were children. Even in the presence of the cultivation, it can't possibly work because the sine qua non element is not there. Without the human brain, there is no human consciousness. But the other insult that they issue, they not only insult you by saying that you're an animal, they insult the animal by saying he's not perfect. There's nothing wrong with a bear. There's nothing wrong with a bear that it has to be able to taught the Blue Danube waltz in order to be a better bear. It's not a better bear. If anything, it's a defective bear because a bear should not dance the Blue Danube waltz. It doesn't dance the Blue Danube waltz. It doesn't dance anything. It doesn't do anything that people do because it's a bear. It does what bears do. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfect. And so are you. Perfect. You've been killing yourself since you were 5 years old. Since you discovered you'd have a mind, you've been doing everything you can to pretend you don't have one. to try to escape the awful responsibility of having one, to follow some dogma or to follow some herd or to follow anything except your own mind, except your own conscience, except your own will, except your own wants, except your own values, except your own redemption, except your own splendor. You've been willing to follow anything except your own thriving, your own self-worship, your own worthiness to be alive. It's Easter. It's Easter Sunday. I released Man Alive on Easter Sunday 2 years ago, but that was 2 years and 2 weeks ago by the calendar because Easter moves. I don't really care for the idea of self-sacrifice in Christianity. I think Paul got agape all wrong, or the people who read Paul, interpreted Paul, got agape all wrong, and therefore they really screwed up a reasonably decent expression of Greek philosophy with this idea of self-sacrifice. I really don't care for the idea of resurrection or redemption of sins by way of resurrection. I don't like these stories. I don't like the idea of an afterlife, and I don't like the idea that the only way that your life can be good or worthy or valuable or pleasurable or decent or honest or pure or whole or wholesome or perfect, the only way those things can happen is for you to be dead. The only good one is a zero. No. No, I refuse to accept that. I will not live that way. I will not live my life as if the only thing that matters is the end of it. I will not live my vitality as if the only thing that matters is its decay. I will not argue to the universe, whether I argue from religion or science. I will not argue that the only thing that matters is entropy. The only thing that matters is decay. The only thing that matters is deterioration. The only thing that matters, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The only thing that matters is the ashes and the dust. What happened in between doesn't matter at all. To the contrary. I came from raw chemicals. To raw chemicals I am destined. I am bound. But what matters about my life is what happens in between. What matters about my life is my life. And I want to talk to you about the resurrection of yours. The resurrection of your ego. The resurrection of yourself. The resurrection of your self-adoration. The resurrection of the child, of the toddler, who was just as eager as any puppy. Who was just as arrogant as Odysseus, my bloodhound. Who was just as confident as any lion. Who could stalk the earth in knee pants and sundresses. And yet stalk the earth as a god. As someone who had every right to be alive and knew it from the inside out. Didn't know it conceptually, but knew it in every cell, in every blood vessel, in every hair on the skin. In every atom, every fiber of your being. You knew that it was right for you to be alive. You knew that your life was whole and wonderful and perfect. You knew that everything was an adventure and there was a delightful surprise around every corner and that everything would be steadily more perfect from now on. That's the way you thought when you were 4. Before you could really think, that's the way you thought. And almost as soon as after you learned how to think, almost as soon as you fully cultivated father tongue in your mind, almost immediately you set about destroying yourself. You set about crucifying yourself in every possible way. You set about finding new and better ways to criticize everything there is about you, and to demean and diminish and minimize everything that you have, and to cheat yourself out of everything that you might have had, that you could have. I want that to stop. I want that to stop. I want that to end. Virtue is more than that. You got to pursue your values. But at the very beginning of that process, and at an absolute minimum, you have to stop pursuing your disvalues. You have to stop destroying yourself. You have to stop crucifying yourself. That seems like a worthy message for a church. You don't know anybody who talks like I do, who talks about the things that I talk about, who talks with the kind of arrogant moral confidence that I put on display in the services every Sunday and the other videos that I make and the things that I write. You don't know anybody like me. I know you don't. I think you should do a better job of valuing me. I want you to send me money. I want you to send me stuff. I want you to send me your talents and your labor. Go to selfadoration.com and look for a link called I Don't Go to Your Church, and you can make donations to this church, whatever kind of donation you want to make. I want it. But before that, I want you to value what I'm saying. I want you to make the effort to understand what I'm talking about and really get good at it, really master it. I want you to follow through. That's what you have to do second, is follow through on these ideas. But until you really understand them, you can't follow through on them. So that's the first step, is just think, just think, just think. I'm going to say things week after week after week. I'm going to say things that worry your way into your brain. I've got a little nail gun that I use to pound ideas right into your head. And I know I'm doing it. I know I'm good at it. I'm getting better at it all the time. And look at me 2 years from now. Look at me 10 years from now. I'll be amazing at it. But I know I'm doing this. I know I'm driving little nails into your brain, and you can't ignore them. And the more you try to ignore them, the more they're going to hurt you. So figure out whether or not they belong there and do something about it. Think about it. Follow through. Admirable choice. That's where it starts. Follow through. I have admonition that I say all the time. I say it to myself, but I say it to everybody. If you get mail from me, you'll find it in my mail from time to time, because it's just something that's uppermost in my mind all the time. It's always around. It's always there, and I always think about it. I think it's wonderful. It's been with me for 30 years at least, maybe longer than I have no idea how long it's been with me. I don't remember the first time I wrote it down because I don't have to write it down. It's with me in my brain. I never have to write it down. These are the words. Be who you are. Do what you want. Have what you love. Be who you are, do what you want, have what you love. Be who you really are on the inside, the person that you know and love from the inside out, the one that you make a stout effort not to show while you're shambling through the mall looking like a whipped dog. Inside that whipped dog there is a self, and that self, let it out. Be who you are, be that person. Be the person you admire most. It's not another person, it's you. It's there inside your brain. It's been there since you were 5. That self-concept has been there since you were 4 or 5 years old. Live it from the inside out. Be who you are. Do what you want. Do what you actually want to do, what you want done. Whatever it is that you're doing right now should be what you want most to be doing right now. Don't do what you don't want to do. That's bad enough, but do what you do want to do. Do what you want. Have what you love. You have a hierarchy of values. If you pursue it from the top down, if you pursue it in order, you will have what you love. And that's completely appropriate. It's appropriate for a lion. It's appropriate for Odysseus. It was appropriate for you when you were a 4-year-old child. And it's appropriate for you now. This is what is ontologically normal, for you to be who you are, do what you want, and have what you love. And everything else is a disease. And ultimately a fatal disease. It's killing. You're killing everything that you can have in this life. Whether or not you are pursuing some paradise in the next life, you are manufacturing your own personal private hell in this one, simply by not being who you are, not doing what you want, not having what you love. I love the human mind. I love what the human mind can do. And therefore I love what the human animal can become. I love what we do become at our very best. But I hate to see all of this wasted potential. So many human beings doing everything they can to avoid living up all the way to their humanity. They put on pantomimes of follow through, but they don't really follow through, because the only thing you can follow through on is what you really want. Everything else is just a decoy. Everything else is just camouflage. But if you listen to me, and if you do the things I talk about, all that will change. You'll have that life that you knew you were going to live when you were 4, that perfect life. You knew it would never be less than perfect, and it won't be. It will be perfect. And you can't undo the past, but you can make up for it. We've talked about that in previous services, how to pursue redemption. But knowing that you can have that life, knowing that you can have that kind of perfection, not Odysseus's insensate perfection, not knowing that you might have something to complain about, but never complaining anyway, whether or not you have anything to complain about, being so enthralled by the life that you're making for yourself that you're not even aware of those slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, that your life is perfect because you decided to have nothing less. You decided that in any opportunity to win or lose, you were only gonna win. You were never gonna lose. And you just decide to live that way and follow through. It's not instantaneous, but you follow through, and eventually you are living that way. And you couldn't have any better proof than the face that you've been sitting here looking at for the last half hour or so. How did my face get like this? It's because I live this way from the inside out, and so can you. It's a praxis. A praxis is a practice that you undertake and effect over time. It's not one time, it's again and again and again. A praxis is a transaction that you effect on yourself. A transaction is multiple events, and these are multiple events that you are taking on yourself over time, and you deploy this praxis, and over time it will become your life. It will become your identity from the inside out. You will be that same person that you were when you were 4 or 5, and not the person that you've been trying and failing to pretend to be ever since. I can give you your whole life. I can give you redemption in this life. I can give you paradise in this life. I can give you perfection in this life. The way I give it to you is by delegating the whole job to you. All you have to do is follow through. I love what you can become. You're going to love the process of becoming it. Bless you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Sunday. Have a wonderful Easter. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful